A lot of us place a lot of emphasis on talent, don't we? I mean, we look at someone who's talented and say, wow. Right? Talent does that to people. It dazzles, you know. Talent dazzles. And you look at talent and say, wow, I wish I could be like that. And yet you find that excellence is not about talent alone. In fact, a major part of excellence has nothing to do with talent. And in course of time, once you go beyond a certain level, ability or talent is the most useless virtue to possess. It's what you do with that talent that matters. And that's why Mukesh used a word that I love, attitude. Beyond a point, it is attitude that counts for far more than talent. Because talent breeds an ego. And talent never solves problems beyond a point. And I was fascinated by something that Sandy Gordon said when we were doing a program together. Because I had seen a lot of young cricketers, extremely talented, who the moment they faced a roadblock did not know what to do. Because they had never had to struggle to succeed. They always used their talent to succeed. And Vinod Kambli is an example of that. The moment Courtney Walsh bounced him in Bombay, he was 22 years old. Was he? Yeah, he was 22 years old then. In 1994, he was 22 years old. Didn't know what to do. Did not play a test match after that. His last test match was when he was 22 years old. Just did not know how to play the bouncing ball because talent had solved everything for him before. In the Australian Army, when they are, and this is something that doesn't come from sport, but it's something a sports scientist told me, that when they're building an elite core team, they look at your career record, your track record, and if you've never failed, they don't pick you. They don't pick you because they say, if this man experiences failure, will he know what to do? They pick people who have failed and bounced back. And that is where your attitude comes through. And, I mean, let's look at excellence. What is excellence about? It's about being in the top 10% in your profession. I mean, I know I'm talking to people who want to be in the top 1%, but there are a lot of ordinary people around us around. So let's say top 10%. Is talent important when you get to be in the top 10%? I mean, everybody in the top 10% will have the same talent, right? So what's your USP? It's what you do with the talent that counts. And unfortunately in our sport, and I think in India as a nation, we're dazzled by talent a great deal. I found that beyond a certain time in sport, as indeed in broadcasting, that your work ethic and your attitude counts from far more than talent. I mean, Tendulkar is a prime example. The moment you say Tendulkar, if I asked you if you had one of those things that talk show hosts do, I'll give you a word and you give me a connecting word in one word. You say Tendulkar, people say talent, right? He played 55 games as a 14-year-old without a break. 55 days. He'd practice for 2 hours, play a game, practice 2 hours, fall asleep on the dining table. And do that 55 days in a row. That's attitude. You know, we think, and this is something we talk about in our corporate lectures as well, where we advise against talent. When Tendulkar was born, it wasn't that this nurse picked him up and said, here, Mrs. Tendulkar, here's 70 hundreds for you. Yeah? It isn't Tendulkar's talent that's produced 70 hundreds. It's his work ethic, it's his attitude, and more than anything else, when you reach the top, it's his passion to perform. And that counts for far more. The attitude and the passion counts for far more than ability. Ability opens the first door. It might open the second door. It's not going to open the last door for you. Because the guy who's bowling the ball at you has got equal ability as you. He's not going to run up to bowl and say, oh, sorry, you're a genius. Sorry, I'll give you a simple ball. Which is what India's bowlers did in 1948 when they went to Australia. They were so much in awe that they said, we are going to bowl to Bradman. It was understandable in those days. India was a different country. But they were in awe of bowling to Bradman. How were they ever going to get him out? And they didn't. And Bradman enjoyed himself. If you look at Bradman's record, actually, Bradman only ever played in 2 countries. And when Bradman playing at home in home conditions against a half-strength Indian team, see, he must have had a party for them every evening. It's also excellence, I think, is also about learning from mistakes. You know, there'll be a lot of people in this room, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people in your learning academy as well, who are so driven that they think a mistake is a crime and that a mistake is a matter of shame. Let's be honest to ourselves, guys and girls, sorry. You know, we guys are very limited in our view of the world. We're a bit like George Bush, but I can't say that openly. we keep saying guys all the time. And if you worked in sport all your life, then you sort of tend to go into the guy thing a little too much, which is sad for everybody. Deep down inside, you ask yourself, when you make a mistake, what's your first reaction? I hope nobody ever looks at me again. Right? I'm going to tell you that mistakes can be your best friend. Because the more mistakes you make, the more you know what not to do. And excellence is as much about knowing what to do as knowing what not to do. And if you can be outstanding at knowing what not to do, then the road to what to do opens up before you, doesn't it? I tried telling that to one of my friends who was in the same dorm as me, and we stayed in touch afterwards. He was one of these IT freaks. And I was telling this, I said, this is my attitude about mistakes. I said, the more mistakes you make, the more you know what not to do. And he promptly extended the limits to infinity, as you tend to do, and said, therefore, the most successful guy is the one who only makes mistakes. Right? That would be a mathematical conclusion to it, wouldn't it? Every time I make a mistake, I learn. The more mistakes I make, the more I learn. If I only make mistakes, I only learn. Right? It doesn't quite work like that. But I've yet to meet a situation in life where you're not allowed to make a mistake. Everybody's allowed to make a mistake. It's the second or the third mistake that you're not allowed to make. You make the same mistake twice, thrice, then you lose respect. It's, when bowlers are planning how to get batsmen out, they look for weaklings and say, this guy gets out here all the time. It's because you get out there all the time that they're able to make a plan against you. But if you make a mistake and say, I will not make that mistake again, because I know this is where I can go wrong, then you're starting to do very well. And I found it helped me enormously. I made a million mistakes. Honestly, I've made the most embarrassing mistakes on television. On live television, I've made some absolute bloomers. But I said I won't make them again. Because every time I got to that situation, I said, hang on, buddy, last time you were there, you did that wrong. So it's almost as if little alarm bells go off in your mind. Every time you sit in front of a live camera and you're heading down a path, very often that path is with 40 seconds to go before ending a program, asking Sidhu a question. You know you've made a mistake straight away. Because it won't end in 40 seconds. But I can say that because he's my dearest friend of the current ESPN Star team. So when you've got a very dear friend, you can get away with murder.